Hello and welcome to the ARRLD Rural Romance panel. I'm Jaye Ford. I write crime fiction. I also write romantic comedy as Janette Paul. And I'm talking with four fabulous rural romance authors, Fiona McArthur, just a wave there, Fiona McArthur, Cathryn Hein, Carly Lane, and Sarah Williams. Yay. In a moment, I'm going to give each of them a short intro, but first some details on how the panel will work. I'm going to be talking to our authors for about 30 minutes, half an hour, and then I'll give readers a chance to put their questions to them. And then before we say goodbye, we'll be holding up our treasure hunt numbers so everybody can kind of pick them up. So first of all, for some introductions, Fiona McArthur has sold more than 2 million books in 12 languages, including more than 30 medical romances for Harlequin, self-help non-fiction, 6 outback romance novels, 2 novellas, and has recently branched into indie publishing. Last year, she retired after 35 years as a rural midwife, midwifery educator, and obstetric emergency training, and is proud she's never written a book without a birth or pregnancy between the covers. Hello, Fiona. Cathryn Hein is, a little away from Cathryn, is the best-selling author of 14 romance and romantic adventure novels and a regular finalist of RWA and ARRLD Book of the Year Awards. She got a degree in agriculture and a postgrad in business management, then worked in the agricultural and turf seeds industry before a move to France gave her the chance to start writing. Her romances are warm and emotional and feature themes that don't flinch from the tougher side of life. Carly Lane, a little wave. Carly is the author of 17 best-selling rural romance novels with 3 books out in just the last 12 months. Her latest, Fool Me Once, was released in April. She also writes contemporary fantasy and under the pen name KB Mole, writes romantic suspense. Carly lives on the mid-north coast of New South Wales in a town where 3 generations of her family grew up. Before becoming a full-time writer, she was a pathology collector. Nothing at all to do with romance there.
No.
And last of all, Sarah Williams, a wave. Sarah is the author of 6 rural romance novels, including the Brigadier Station series, with number 7, not part of this series, a new series coming out next month. She's also a small press publisher, provides publishing support for aspiring authors and indie publishers, and has the enviable job of speaking with best-selling romance authors on her podcast, Write with Love. Sarah grew up on a kiwi fruit orchard in New Zealand, then travelled the world before settling in Queensland and starting her life as a writer. So I'm going to ask each of you a few questions about your latest works, and then we can have a bit more of a general chat about rural romance. I'm starting with Fiona. You have 4 books coming out in the second half of this year, and wow, that's been really busy. The first one is called Maeve's Baby, which comes out in August, which is your 3rd story in the Outback Brides series with Tule Publishing. So Maeve is a friend of Lacey, the heroine from your last book in the series. Did you have Maeve waiting in the wings, or is she the result of the success of the series and a chance to write more?
Yeah, the second half, yeah. So no, Maeve wasn't there, but when she arrived, she was very noticeable. So she jumped up, and she's just been such a delight. That was one of those. You have the occasional book that's really fun to write and really quick, and that was it, right in the middle of COVID, and it was just start to finish and done. Great.
Oh, nice. And so what can you tell us about Maeve?
Well, she's a midwife, surprise. And she's working in a doctor's surgery. So, yeah, we get to have some excitement. Some of the previous characters in my series are having babies, and yeah, it was just lovely to go back. And you know, it was lovely to work with Cathryn again, and Kelly and Barb Hannay, and it's just going to be, yeah, it's a fun thing. And it comes out, Maeve's Baby comes out, it's the 2nd book in this 3rd series. So Kelly Hunter first, then Maeve's Baby, and then Cathryn, is it? Yep. And then Barb Hannay in September. So you're the end of August, aren't you, Cathryn? Yeah, yeah.
And we'll talk to Cathryn about that in a little while as well. And yeah, so quite nice for the brides in the Outback Bride series to start moving on to the next stage of life.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's been a really fun trip. Yeah.
And so your 7th Outback medical story is coming out in September, called The Bush Telegraph. Congratulations.
Yep.
Yes, and in that story, you bring back a character that readers first met in an earlier Outback novel. Her name's Maddie, and why are you telling Maddie's story now?
It's 11 years later. Maddie, if anyone's read the Baby Doctor, Maddie was the young girl who had the baby all by herself in the deserted service station. And this is 11 years later, and she's become a really responsible and experienced nurse, and she wants to go back out back. So she and her little baby Bridget are going out back, and they're going back to Spinifex, and she's going to face some ghosts from the past.
Nice.
So yeah, it was really fun. Jaye and I actually went to the Winton Outback Writers Festival, and that was where I ended up setting it. We went to this place that had this amazing jump up, and that's where we really set the story, and it was amazing, wasn't it, Jaye?
Yes, it's one of the perks of research for writing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to Cathryn. You have 2 titles out this year. The first one came out in March, called Scarlet and the Model Man. That's the 6th story in your Levenham Love. Oh, there she is. That's a gorgeous cover, the Levenham Love Story series. And so Scarlet is a gin-drinking artist with a nose for business. And her story, in some ways, we did meet her in a couple of the earlier books, and but you went with her for this story. And in some ways, her story was inspired by your own recent writing experiences. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, Scarlett, she's an up-and-coming artist, and she's got a residency a government-funded residency in London. It's an enormous opportunity for her, but she's lost her creativity, and she feels that, like a fraud if she takes up a residency if she doesn't get it back. So a lot of the book is actually her exploration of trying to get that creativity back, and which she does with the aid of a surfing dairy farmer. But yeah, in 2018, I came down with a mystery illness, and it took a very long time to diagnose, and I was in and out of hospital. And during that period, I just couldn't write. I really lost, not the will. I had plenty of will. I wanted to do it. I just would sit down and nothing would happen. And all the tricks that I normally use to boost my creativity just failed. So there was a lot of that experience, of my experience in the book.
And so, first of all, are you out of that situation?
Yeah.
Health-wise and creative-wise?
Just about. I'm off for an MRI tomorrow morning, and that'll give me the latest lowdown. So
yes, well, fingers crossed. And the creativity, the writing side of it?
Yes, I'm not back to where I was, unfortunately, but I'm getting there. I'm pretty much trying to write through everything at the moment. So as long as I'm producing, I feel like I'm moving forward. So at the moment, I'm working. If a short story comes to mind, then I'll write a short story. So yeah, I'm just trying to keep productive.
Well, yeah, it's tough when that happens, but amazingly in all of that, you've still got 2 books coming out. So this year. So the next one is Serenity's Song, which comes out, it's part of the Outback Bride series. Fiona's comes out first. There's another one, and then yours, which is out late August. It's number 3 in the 3rd series. So this book centers on Jessie and Serenity, who we met in the last story, your last story, Elsa Stan. So, similar question as Fiona had. Was their story on the drawing board from the beginning, or did they kind of drop into the story as you were writing?
No, I set up Elsa Stan so that they would have their story. That was a deliberate action, because I just felt Serenity was such a great character. She's very quirky, and she dyes her hair multiple colours, and she's
and a bit of a scene stealer as well.
Yeah, she's quite quick-witted, and she does music bombs. She was just such great fun that I didn't want to let her go, and I really wanted to write her story. And it just seemed obvious that Jess would be the ideal man, because he's a bit of a bad boy, and he has a really bad history, and he's been quite hurt. His last girlfriend sold him out to the media, and he doesn't trust women. And so I had the idea of basically throwing them together and giving them a forced proximity type romance, and they get caught in a cave in the cellars underneath the emporium where Serenity works, and they're stuck
so I
together.
assume they have alcohol.
No, they just have each other, and kind of it's good fun. It's good fun. It's they let a lot of secrets out during that time, and it can get quite emotional. And of course, you know, when they come out the other end, Jess has revealed all his inner secrets, and that's a real danger for him.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Carly. Your latest rural romance, Fool Me Once, has been on the shelves since April. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a story about Georgie Henderson, who has dreams of one day buying back her family farm. And you've said that the writing of this book ended up being a bit of therapy for you. So what was that all about?
I think when I wrote it originally, it was a while back, actually. It was right back in the beginning before I'd sort of really got published. And then I've sort of pulled this one out and rewritten it and made it a lot longer and more in depth. But at the time, I think I drew on a little bit of personal experience. My grandparents had a farm my entire life, and that was sort of our home base. We moved around a lot as kids. My dad was in the bank, so the farm was sort of always our home. It was the only sort of one constant we had, and we grew up there. Some, you know, the best memories of your childhood sort of were in this one place. And when that sold, it was really hard. It was sort of I think you just always thought that it would be there, and then when it wasn't, it was a really hard thing to sort of come to terms with. But and I guess in the back of my mind, I always thought, you know, one day I'll buy this back and it'll be lovely. It'll be back in the family again. But yeah, we sort of I now live back in the area, but I've sort of come to the conclusion that it's not the same once you go back, once it's changed. I think the most important part was that, you know, it had all those memories, and it had Nana and Pop, and it had, yeah, it's just not the same when you go back now when someone else has been there. So it sort of was a little bit of an eye-opener, and one of those things that as you're older and you can see it a lot more clearer, it sort of was interesting, because when I wrote it, I didn't sort of have that perspective
The first
of it.
time around.
Now, yeah, so rewriting it sort of gave me a bit of a clearer, yeah.
Okay, so my last book was also a rewrite of an old one. I had a lot of fun doing that. Did you enjoy rewriting that story, or was that repicturing all the farm stuff for you?
No, I hated rewriting it. It was really horrible. No, it was very hard. You would think that if you had a book pretty much there and you were just sort of redoing parts and stuff, it would be a lot easier, but it wasn't. I had to basically rewrite the whole thing anyway. But and I think because, you know, you've lived with the story so long and you knew sort of what was happening, it was just really painful. I found it really painful writing. But I'm glad I did. I felt like it needed to be a lot more developed than the first time around. So I think it's turned into a lot more of a story. And I was glad when I finished it. It was good.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to move on to Sarah. Your 7th title, The Perfect Blend, comes out next month. Congratulations, very exciting. It's the second in your Heart of the Hinterland series, and when I realised the blend in the title is actually referring to coffee, I was pretty excited about that. I think coffee in a rural romance is quite hard to pass up. The Perfect Blend is a bit of a change for you. Farming takes centre stage in all your other books. Brigadier Station series is set on an outback farm, and the last one was also farming and farmers. But in this story, you move your characters into town, a small town. Why did you decide to shift that focus?
Yeah, well, this is number 2 in the series, and the first one was The Dairy Farmer's Daughter. And that was 2 years ago. I meant to run with this a lot sooner, but I got distracted with other, outback stories. But it's based in Mullaney in the Sunshine Coast, which is where I actually live. So I love being able to set it right here and being able to look out on the dairy farms and the coffee roaster is literally right across the road from me, and he supplies me with my caffeine addiction. So
And does he think it's him in the story?
No, my coffee roasters across the road are actually this really lovely gay married men. No, definitely not. Yeah, that was definitely where the inspiration came from, when I heard Mulaney Coffee and then I met them and I saw how they roast, and I'm just like, oh, that's going in a book. And then the heroine is Greer Montgomery, who's actually Freya Montgomery's sister, and Freya Montgomery is the dairy farmer's daughter, my original heroine. So she's still on a farm and he's in a different sort of a farm. So,
yeah.
But yeah, small town. It is a bit of a change from outback Queensland, where all my other books have been set, but still Queensland. It's, I like to stick in the States, so that's my one thing.
So you have one standalone title, but your other books are part of series. The first one is Brigadier Station, and now you're working on The Heart of the Hinterland. I'm just wondering, do you, when you're creating a new story, do you think in terms of a series and where that's going to go, or do you start with one story and see what happens next?
I'm pretty much always working around my series. When I started Brigadier Station, I knew there were going to be 3 brothers, so there were going to be at least 3 books. I've actually put 5 in that. I put my standalone, which is The Outback Governess. I actually put that in that series as well. But yeah, I like keeping in that series and keeping the characters. So we meet the characters and we get to keep meeting them later on and that sort of thing. So I really enjoy it. And pretty much any plot idea I have, I can weave back into one of those story series anyway. So yeah, it's not too much of a drama for me.
Yeah, well, it's nice. And so I'd like to move on to some more general discussion about rural romance. Between the 4 of you, we have rural, outback and small town stories. And one thing that comes through as I was reading all of your books is the passion you all have for the land and the small communities that you write about. So I'm wondering what it is about life in rural and small town Australia that makes you want to write about it. Anyone want to jump in and answer that question?
I just think old small town communities, there's a great deal of warmth there and a lot of comfort. And they're very appealing because of that, you know, that whole idea about people coming together and lending a hand and being able to rely on one another. So I think that's a really important aspect of rural romance. Like I used to when people used to ask me what was the appeal about rural romance, and I used to joke and say that farmers are sexy, and that's true because you know they tend to be practical men, and there's something really quite appealing about a man who's good with his hands, you know. And, but you know, it's a lot deeper than that. It's I think readers very much appreciate that feeling of comfort that you get from having a community, and that's what you find in a lot of rural romances, I think.
And Carly, what about you? Because especially your last one was, especially your last one, Carly, Fool Me Once, was really kind of focused on farming and farming practices. What is it about farming, and also you too, Sarah, that makes you want to write about it?
I don't really start out writing. It just depends where my story is. I'm not like the practical hands-on farmer. We don't have a tractor. But if I have to have a setting with the farm, which has been in a few, the Callaghan series were based on a farm there too, I tend to sort of not go into a lot of depth with it. And when I do, I go and source out my farmers and find out if it looks or sounds practical, what I've written and stuff. But it's sort of the background, I think, to mine a lot. I think it's, especially if you're writing something that involves a family, the farm, I guess that comes back to my background too, the farms where the family is. It's sort of the centre of the home. And I think for me, that's what I tend to write about, adding in probably a few issues around the way, like rural suicide and things like that sort of pop up. But yeah, for me, I think it's more the family and the home aspect.
Yeah, and for me, like I grew up on a orchard in New Zealand, so, and I basically spent 18 years trying to get out of my small town community. But then having lived in the city for many years and moving back to the country, albeit in a different country, you just appreciate it so much more from an older perspective. And I love a cowboy. I've been reading cowboy, Western, American ranches, all those sorts of books for many years. And yeah, give me a shirtless cowboy with an Akuba or a Stetson any day, I'm sold.
Fiona, you kind of come at it from a slightly different perspective because you deal with the medical side of things and also the isolation of being in the outback. What is it that appeals to you, that makes you want to feel like you're a part of that in your writing?
I think readers really like to have a little insight, or I like to give readers an insight into the towns, into the differences that you have when everybody sort of knows everybody's business, and when there's social problems in town, and how actually the community can actually deal with some problems by pulling together. And I just like to, I don't know, highlight the fun of everyone working together and giving each other heaps. And yeah, it's just fun. It's lovely. And I just think that everybody should appreciate the fact that people can be doing it really hard, but there's always this larrikin humour in the background that's sort of carrying it. And yeah, I like to share that.
And rural romance is more than just where the story is set, though. It's also the heroes and the heroines who live in those places. And it's not just about their jobs. How do you think the rural romance hero is different from other heroes?
Self-sufficiency, I think. He's much more self-sufficient. What do you guys reckon?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're a lot more practical. That's what appeals to it for me anyway. That real can-do sort of stuff. The washing machines breaks down, they can fix it sort of stuff. Get a new type in for it or something. These kinds of things. There's not. I find that extremely sexy.
Yeah. So even like you talk about flying doctors, you're talking about providing a service that a city hospital provides with screens of people, and they're doing it with one or two people, and they're managing out of a box, Yeah. And I just think that is so heroic. It's just heroic.
Yeah. And Carly?
Yeah, I think, I guess it's, country people, I suppose, in general, do approach things a lot differently just because of the way they are brought up or have been brought up. So, yeah, I think it comes back to just that difference between a country sort of person and, I guess, someone born and bred in the city.
And Sarah, you talked about having the shirt-off farmer, Stetson Akuba, is incredibly appealing. What do you think it is about heroines in rural settings? What is it that makes them different to heroines in other romance stories?
Yeah, whenever I've done research out in the outback, I've just been like, wow, you guys are so tough. Like, how do you manage this? It's been drought in Queensland for how many decades now? And the men, the women, all of them, they're just so incredibly versatile and strong. And I just have so much appreciation for what they have to go through. And I mean, they really are. They're just a whole different breed of people from most of the coasties that I know, and they're just incredible. Like so much appreciation for them. Just can't get over it.
Anyone else want to talk about heroines?
Just going to say the kids as well. I was watching one of these 7:30 reports, and there was these young girls speaking about the drought and not trying to cause any problems for their parents because they had so much problem, not asking for anything, working before and after school to get the feed out to the cattle. And it was just like, yes, it's that whole work ethic. Everyone relies, the families, the cattle, everyone relies on them to keep doing their work. There's no opt out. There's no Saturday, Sundays. And it's like, yeah, that's not how I worked as a midwife. I worked 8 hours a day.
It's
Yeah.
that can do attitude, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know? Because no one else is going to do it for you. You have to do your stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think there's also something really touching about a strong man in particular who gets to that point of depression or really dealing with the tough stuff and being broken and vulnerable by that. Nice to write about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm writing about in the next book. But yeah, but you go ahead, Carly. It's all good.
Oh, I was just moving.
Yellow box now.
I had a couple recently, and one for the December book sort of deals with broken rural men. But yeah, I think it's something that, yeah, it sort of tends to be a good way to try and get a message out with these men, because you can sort of relate to a lot of what's going on out there, and I think they need to have a face to the story type thing, so that, yeah, without being too preachy, I do like to use a good broken man.
Well, which comes to the next point. Rural romance paints lovely images of life on the land or in the bush, but it also shows those tough realities, and you guys all handle that in such a nice way. Between your books, you've highlighted things like drought, rising debt, depression and suicide, isolation, and women in farming. And I'm wondering, this year has been so especially tough with devastation from drought and bushfires. And of course, throw into that the world being turned upside down by a pandemic. I'm wondering how the stories you guys tell are going to be affected by the experiences of 2020.
Yeah, I've already started writing a bushfire one, which was happening when the bushfires were on. But yeah, I think it does. I think it gives you new insight to a lot of things. And when you sort of, not that we went through them as badly as some people, but you do see the effect it had on your community, on your, you know, your neighbours and things. And yeah, it's enough to sort of spark a lot of new material.
There's so much.
There'll be a whole heap of bushfire books coming out in the next couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know,
but it's different. Everyone's different. It's amazing. We've got the drought and the bushfires and the flood straight after.
Yes, yeah.
But I think, sorry, I was just going to say with the COVID, you know, there's so much there that you can pick up from that without actually focusing on the COVID side of it so much. With regards to, say, horticultural industries that used to supply all the high-end restaurants and things like that, you know, that the people that all of a sudden didn't have a market anymore. You know, there's lots and lots of stuff that can be looked at there as well, I think. And
I think that the rural and outback experience of the pandemic and the isolation is quite different to what we've experienced in, what at least me anyway, has experienced in a city, and which has been getting most of the media coverage, and be really interesting to have stories that actually look at what happened in those communities during that time.
Yeah, it's been especially difficult for my parents-in-law who run a business in outback Queensland, and you know, just certainly that's something that could be mined possibly in the future. But yeah, it caused enormous difficulties.
Yeah. I want to look at research for a while. Research is one of those fun things that authors get to do, but it can also be a bit of a drag at times. So I'm interested in the fact that all of you have personal experiences in rural and regional areas. I'll just go through that a little bit. Carly lives in a small town on the New South Wales mid-north coast. Fiona is on a small farm, actually not far from Carly. Sarah grew up in an orchard, and you live in a small town. And Cathryn is a country girl from South Australia. So all of you already have quite a bit of small town, rural, regional experience, personal experience. So what kind of research do you mostly need these days?
On a rural store, which my middle child is running a rural store. So that's my research.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened to them in the last 6 or 12 months up there is just, yeah, amazing stuff. So that's really fun. But he's going to kill me when he finds out.
Yeah, it varies from book to book. You know, in Serenity's song, they're in old cellars under the town, and if you go to Great Western, just near ARRLD in Western Victoria, my cellars are based on the drives at Great Western, which are the old underground cellars, and they have this really creepy fungus growing down in them, which came over from France back, I think, in the 1850s, something like that, on some imported oak barrels, and then just took over the inside of the cellars. And yeah, I actually had to do a bit of research on that as well recently. So it really varies between books.
And so your last one, Elsa's Stand, the main character in that, the hero, actually spent some time in the opal fields. Did you get a chance to go out there?
Yeah, I actually visited Lightning Ridge and had a bit of a noodle around. So that was really good fun. And that, you know, that all ended up in the book. And I was most interested also into they have their own kind of communities out there, and a little bit of self-policing, and there was some quite interesting stories when I dug in deep about what happened to people that thieved off other people's claims, and yeah, so that was a bit of fun.
And Fiona, you get to do a bit of travelling for your research, also for your your other stories as well.
Yeah. It was interesting. You talk about funny things, just Cathryn. When I was in Central Australia, I was writing a story about a plane crash in Central Australia. Well, it was really Northern Territory. And the lady that was giving us a tour told us about how there was a criminal who killed someone and poked them down inside an ant's nest, and then the ants repaired the damage. And they never found the body until years and years later when it was inside the ant's nest. And that's just like one of those, and I put that in a book because you had to.
And Carly, you've written a few books, especially the last one, Fool Me Once, that talks a lot about farming and farming practice. Do you need to do much research in that, or is a lot of that already in your head?
Specific stuff that you don't have any clue about, which is a lot of it for me, I will always make sure I run it through past someone, because you don't want to come off sounding like you have no idea. But other things, my book for December, I've actually used my Guy Fawkes horses in, and anyone who's ever sat through one of my talks will know if you start me talking about the horses, it never stops. So that was really lovely, because I could put all this stuff in, but my editors have actually gone through and went, don't know if we actually need to know all of this. And so I had to sort of go through it and take stuff out. And I'm thinking, but these are the good bits. Like, so, it's sort of sometimes you've got to hold back when it's something really interesting that you really love to talk about. Yeah, you need a good editor to sit there and just say, yeah, too much sometimes.
And so with the farming stuff, do you write the story and then find a farmer to answer your questions, or do you go and talk to people, visit farms, see what inspires you and write around that?
No, I usually, it depends. Normally it's because I don't plot, so any of you particularly plotted people will probably have eye twitches about it, but I don't even know what I'm writing half the time till I get to it, so I tend to have to then go and find somebody, or I do have quite a reliable little group that I always go to, me again. So I have acquired quite a few people that I can, find out stuff from if I need to. But yeah, I tend to have to get to that point and then realise I've got to go and find out stuff about this. So
yeah. And Sarah, what about you? I'm guessing that your new series, the Hinterland series, is set close to home, which unfortunately for you means no trips away to go research. But the Brigadier Station set in outback Queensland, and as Fiona said, we went up to outback Queensland for the Outback Writers Festival last year, and it's amazing there. Did you get to make some very cool trips out there?
I did. I was living in Townsville when I first started writing the Brigadier Station series, So every 6 months or so, I would bundle my family, which includes 4 kids at primary school. We would take off in the camper and go to Longreach, Winton, Julia Creek, Hewenden, you name it, wherever we could kind of drive and get back within 2 weeks. And
yeah, right.
yeah, these days, when I did the Dairy Farmer's Daughter, I spent an entire day in a milking shed, so knee-high in cow dung. Yeah, just these days I get to wander around the hills of the Sunshine Coast hinterland and just talk to locals and pick
Which has
people's
has
brains.
its appeal as well, yes.
Absolutely, and drink lots of coffee and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's still good fun. I still love traveling into the outback, and we're planning a trip in the next school holidays. It's just me and the kids now, so that'll be fun to take them out there. But they love it. They love being in the outback. They love the red dirt and the people. And I took them to the Longreach School of the Air a few years ago, and my kids literally just turned to me and said, "So this is how I want to get taught from now on." But yeah, they really appreciate it, and I love being able to raise them knowing other people live in a different way, and you guys are really pretty lucky. So
yeah. So you are all amazingly productive writers, multi-books coming out in 1 year, which I am very jealous about. I want to know how disciplined you are with your writing time. Carly, you said a couple of years ago that you write around your kids' time. Is it still like that for you?
No, well, it is sometimes, but then my kids have grown up, come back, gone, come back. So now I'm all over the place. But yeah, I do still try to keep it from 9 in the morning till 3. I've still got one at school, so that helps. But yeah, lately it's been really tough with everything going on. I've really struggled to actually do my full day's work, sort of thing. But I still write.
Is that because people are around, or because you're kind of distracted?
No, they're home. It's like, what the hell is this? Where is my peace and quiet? And the cats are looking at each other like, why is everyone here? So, yeah, it's really disrupted quite a lot. But yeah, I'm hoping it's starting to settle down again now. So back into routine. And
Cathryn, what about you?
I try to keep a routine. It's been quite disrupted these last couple of years. Yeah, like I said, I'm not back to where I was. I certainly used to have a routine which was pretty stringent. I'd be at the computer at around about sort of 7 or 7:30 in the morning, and I'd work until 11, and then have a break. Yeah. Whereas now I'm sort of up and about a bit more. I sort of get a bit distracted, I guess, at the moment, and but hopefully I'll get back into the swing of things properly again soon. So
yeah. And Sarah, you've got 4 school-age children. How do you, and you also run a business as well. So how do you balance all of that, or do you not balance all of that?
I try very hard to balance things. Yeah, I'm a single mum to 4 kids now, and so twins who are 8, and then a boy who's 10 and a boy who's 12. And so as soon as they're off to school in the morning, I generally try and write. So I spend the morning writing, and then the afternoon doing business. So I run a publishing house, and I do it single-handedly, so it does take a lot of time. And then it's extracurricular activities all afternoon. School holidays is no way in hell I am getting any work done, so I just take that time off. So I generally try and put out 2 books a year, and it takes me sort of 2 terms per book, and in order to get those 2 books out.
Yeah. And Fiona, I know that you often work on several projects at once, and you also are very strict about keeping particular hours. How do you manage that?
I'm not quite so strict since we had COVID and my husband wasn't going out so much. But I get up early in the morning. So this morning I was up about quarter to 4 or something. And I was writing till about, he leaves at 7 to go on his walk. So that sort of gives me a couple of hours there. And then I can sort of work around the house and get a couple of hours before he comes. And that's me done by 11. So I don't usually do any writing after 11. It's done.
And it's
So,
actually 9:15 at the moment, PM. At
I
the
know,
moment.
I know,
Way past
I
your
know.
bedtime.
Jay and I sometimes go away together, and she writes after lunch, and I'm like saying, "Isn't it happy hour? Isn't it happy hour?" And she's like, "No, we've got hours to go before we drink."
Well, okay, that is fantastic. We've been speaking for about half an hour, a bit longer than that. So I am going to hand it over to our audience for some questions. And I will ask Malvina Yock, first of all. Malvina, if you can switch your camera and unmute your microphone. And there we go. Hello.
Hey, Malvina.
And would you like to ask your question, please? Oh, you had several questions. So can we get one question first, and then we'll come back to you if we have time?
Sure. Well, I might aim this at Fiona actually, but I've loved hearing from Carly, Cathryn, and Sarah, and you too, Jay, about all of your books. I got very excited with Sarah's one about coffee. I thought,
yes.
And I love that country setting that you all put in, because I'm a city girl. And I can't help it. I get uncomfortable in the country. I need your TLC, I think, to walk me through it. And so I go visiting in books, which is great.
Yeah, lovely.
But Fiona, you had a bit of a change of pace with your Midwife on the Orient Express and Midwife in the Jungle. And I've been watching a little bit about train trips recently. I've been on a bit of a train bent. I'm wondering if you can do Midwife on the Garn or Midwife.
I'd love to do Midwife on the Garn. Yes, there's definitely going to be a baby on that train.
Is there?
Yeah, and if it's the Garn, then it'll be around about Uluru somewhere, you know.
And what
yeah,
about,
no, that would be lovely, and it's tax deductible.
That's right.
how about the Indian Pacific?
Absolutely, yes. We can have we
Yeah,
might
the whole
have to have
series
like
of
a
train
slow burning premature baby on that one, I think.
Well, that sounds great. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Two good ideas. I've got them written down, Malvina.
So Malvina, if I can get you to switch your camera and microphone to mute, and we'll hear from Dominique, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you. And Dominique, could you just switch your camera and microphone on? And there we go.
Yes.
Great.
Hello. How's everybody going? Thank you for having us. It's been great listening to you all. I think I read almost everybody's books so far.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Now, would you like? Yeah, great. So you ask your question.
So I've actually got myself back into writing after a few years hiatus, and I would love to know how you guys go writing someone that you don't particularly like or get along with, or the bad guy in your book kind of thing. How you do you have many difficulties with that, or how that works for you?
With my Callahan series, I actually had probably one of my first not likable characters. I don't think other than one mother-in-law that I wrote, wasn't my mother-in-law, either of them. I did find I started writing a character, she became very not likable, and I don't know, I tried to redeem her by the end, because I think everyone's got good qualities, and I think there's always a deeper story behind people like that. And but I still couldn't make her lovable by the end. I think that was just her personality. There's people like that, they're just not nice, really. But I mean, yeah, everyone's got the redeemable qualities somewhere. You just got to dig really deep for them.
Yep.
I think for me, I actually, the few that I've done, I think they've been relatively easy to do. I think it's easier to make someone unlikable than it is to make them likable. You know, it's quite easy to do that. You know, like to make them rude, or to give them an unappealing mannerism. You know, I'm trying to think of a character. I think there was one in The Falls that I wrote where he was just a pompous ass, you know, and so he was really easy to write, because he was kind of a bit over the top as well. But yeah, I probably have a harder time trying to create sympathetic characters more than anything, and especially, you know, like with the heroines and heroes, it's so important that your readers can relate to them and like them, and yeah, so I think that's the ones I probably spend more time over anyway.
And Sarah and Fiona?
It's interesting. I just finished a book for Harlequin called Second Chance in Barcelona, because I went to Barcelona with Bronwyn Jamison last year, and it was really difficult to write this Spanish guy because I don't really have all that much experience of Spanish guys. I'm married to a nice Australian guy and he was a bit more alpha than I write, because I don't write alpha heroes. I'm always the beta hero. He's always this nice, lovely man who gives presents and opens the door for you. So that was really difficult to keep him being Spanish and aristocratic and all those things. And I found it really hard to like those things in him. So, yeah, it was actually quite a challenge, but it was fun enough. He was a lovely hero in the end.
That's good.
But it was really difficult. So I get that.
Yeah.
Difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sarah?
I kind of like all of my characters, even the ones that I don't like as much as others. But yeah, I definitely had an issue in the first Brigadier Station book where one of the brothers wasn't very likable, but he was getting his own book in book 3, so I had to redeem him over kind of 2 1/4 books. And but he actually ended up being the character I came to love the most, because he went on this journey, and it actually just made it really interesting going on this journey with him. And would he do that? No, I'm going to make him do that now. Those sorts of things. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your question, Dominique. I might get you to turn your camera off and mute. And Malvina had a couple of questions, so I might just take another question from Malvina if you want to unmute. Oh, there you go. Yes.
Thank
One more
you.
question, thanks.
One more question. Well, I'm going to ask Cathryn, if you don't mind. Your lovely, lovely country romances are very tender and lovely. Are you ever going to write anything similar to the French Prize in the future? Have you thought about using our country myths and legends to create?
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually have another book written. It's just awaiting something being done with it. But yeah, I have actually thought quite a bit about doing an adventure and setting romantic adventure and setting it in country Australia. In fact, I've been thinking quite seriously about it just this sort of last month or so. I'm not going to say much about it because it's still sort of early days, but it's certainly, you know, I think you can do lots of things with old houses and secrets, and in particular where I'm brought up in South Australia and across into Western districts of Victoria, there are some unreal old country, old money squattocracy houses that are scattered throughout that land, and some in some quite sort of dramatic settings as well. And you wouldn't know they were there unless you sort of go meandering down some rural roads. You'd have no idea they were actually there. And I like the idea of maybe doing something with one of those. So it could be on the cards, Malvina. Could be.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Malvina. I'll just get you to switch your camera and mute your. Thank you very much. Okay, we are just about out of time. So before we go, I'm going to get you all to hold up your romantic rendezvous lockdown treasure hunt piece of information. So if we just do that for about 5 seconds, off we go.
Sorry, Unco.
I think that's everybody's. Okay, that will do. Hopefully, oh wow, that's it. Excellent. Okay, so that's it for us tonight. Thank you very much, all 4 of you. It's been lovely chatting with you, and see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
It was lovely. Thanks, Malvina and Dominique.
Thank you.